For the better part of a decade, China has played a dangerous game on India's northern borders. Beijing has built roads, airstrips, and entire military villages in territory that India considers its own, all while smiling at diplomatic summits and talking about peace. Xi Jinping's strategy has always been the same. Push forward quietly, build infrastructure rapidly, and dare India to do something about it. For years, that strategy worked. But something has changed. India has stopped talking and started deploying. And what India has placed along the line of actual control is not just a response. It is a message. A message written in steel, fire, and supersonic speed. 5 weapons, each one a nightmare for Chinese military planners, now sit within striking distance of China's most sensitive positions in Tibet. And the most telling part of this story is not what India has done. It is what China has not said. Xi Jinping, the man who never misses a chance to threaten Taiwan, the leader who lectures the world about sovereignty while occupying Tibet, has gone conspicuously quiet. And when a man like Xi goes quiet, it is not because he has nothing to say. It is because he has no good answer for what he is looking at. Let us begin with the weapon that changed everything along the LAC. The BrahMos supersonic cruise missile. You have heard of BrahMos before. It is one of the most talked about missiles in the world. But hearing about BrahMos and understanding what it means when India parks it on your doorstep are two very different things. Jointly developed by India and Russia, the BrahMos travels at Mach 2.8, nearly 3 times the speed of sound. To put that in perspective, imagine you are a Chinese military commander stationed at a forward base in Tibet. You receive an alert that a BrahMos has been launched from Indian territory. From a moment that alert reaches your ears, you have less than 2 minutes to react. 2 minutes. That is not enough time to scramble aircraft. It is not enough time to activate most air defense systems. It is barely enough time to understand what is happening before the missile arrives and everything around you ceases to exist. But speed is only part of what makes the BrahMos so dangerous. This missile can execute sharp maneuvers in its terminal phase, meaning it does not fly in a straight line toward its target. It weaves. It dodges. It makes itself nearly impossible to intercept. China's HQ 9 air defense system has never been tested against a target moving at nearly 3 times the speed of sound while performing evasive maneuvers in its final seconds of flight. Most defense analysts will tell you, quietly if not publicly, that the odds of intercepting a BrahMos under those conditions are not in Beijing's favor. India has deployed BrahMos units along multiple points on the LAC, including in Arunachal Pradesh, the very state that China absurdly claims as South Tibet. The deployment is not subtle. India wants China to know these missiles are there because BrahMos is not just a weapon. It is a deterrent. It tells Beijing that any military adventure across the LAC will be met with a response so fast and so devastating that the cost of aggression becomes unthinkable. But India did not stop with BrahMos. Because as lethal as that missile is on offense, India's military planners understand that a strong defense is equally critical when your neighbor has the largest standing army on the planet. And that is where the second weapon enters the picture. One that does not attack. One that waits, watches, and ensures that nothing in the sky above India's borders moves without permission. The S-400 Triumph air defense system. India purchased this Russian-made system despite enormous pressure from the United States, which threatens sanctions under the CAATSA Act. Think about that for a moment. India looked at the most powerful country on earth, weighed the risk of American sanctions against the need to protect its borders from China, and chose the S-400 anyway. That single decision tells you everything about how seriously New Delhi takes the Chinese threat. The S-400 is widely considered the most capable air defense platform ever built. It can track and engage targets at a range of up to 400 kilometers. It can handle multiple threats simultaneously, from fighter jets at high altitude to cruise missiles skimming the terrain. And it operates effectively in the thin air and extreme cold of the Himalayas, exactly where India has placed it. For China's Air Force, this changes everything. Chinese fighters operating from bases in Tibet already face severe disadvantages. The high altitude reduces engine performance and limits payload capacity. Runways are shorter. Fuel burns faster. Reaction times are longer. Now add to those existing problems a defense system that can detect and destroy Chinese aircraft before they even cross the border, and you begin to understand why Beijing has been so uncomfortable. Every Chinese jet that takes off from a Tibetan airbase now does so under the invisible watch of India's S-400. The pilots in those cockpits know, perhaps better than anyone, that the system tracking them rarely misses. But if you think BrahMos and the S-400 represent the full extent of India's response to China, you are very much mistaken. India's third deployment along the border may be the one that truly keeps Chinese generals awake at night. That IT is not a missile, is not a defense system, is something far more versatile, far more visible, and in many ways far more psychologically devastating. It has already been stationed at an airbase so close to China that its pilots can practically see Tibet from their cockpits. Before we get to that weapon and the two that follow, make sure you are subscribed so you never miss a video. Now let us talk about the machine that has made China's Air Force nervous, the Rafale. Even the name carries weight. India acquired 36 of these French-made fighters in a deal that sparked political controversy at home and strategic panic across the border. But politics fades. What remains is one of the most capable multi-role combat aircraft on the planet, and India has stationed it where it matters most. The Rafale operates from Hasamara Air Force Base in West Bengal, positioned to dominate the skies over the entire eastern sector of the LAC and, critically, within easy reach of the Siliguri Corridor, that narrow strip of Indian territory that China has long fantasized about severing. Let's be clear about what the Rafale brings to this equation. This is not just a fighter jet. It is a flying weapons platform that can perform air superiority, deep strike, reconnaissance, and nuclear delivery missions, sometimes in a single sortie. Its Meteor Beyond Visual Range air-to-air missile is considered the most lethal of its kind anywhere in the world. When a Rafale pilot locks onto a target with a Meteor missile, the engagement is effectively over before the enemy pilot even knows he is in a fight. The missile's ramjet propulsion gives a no-escape zone so wide that evasion becomes nearly impossible at operational ranges. But the Rafale's true advantage over anything China can put into the sky from Tibet is not any single weapon. It is versatility that China's J-20 stealth fighter grabs headlines. It looks impressive in flyovers at air shows. But the J-20 has never been tested in combat. Not once. The Rafale, on the other hand, has seen action in Libya, Mali, Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. It has operated in desert heat and Arctic cold. It has dropped precision munitions in environments where a single mistake means civilian casualties and international outrage. The Rafale is not a showpiece. It is a proven killer. And now it sits less than 300 kilometers from the Chinese border, armed, fueled, and ready. For every Chinese military planner studying the LAC situation, the Rafale represents a problem that cannot be solved with more troops or more infrastructure. You do not counter a Rafale with concrete. You counter it with something better in the air. And right now, China does not have anything better in the air. Not in Tibet. Not at those altitudes. Not against a pilot trained to fight in exactly those conditions. But India's deployments are not limited to what flies above the battlefield. Because wars, even modern ones dominated by missiles and aircraft, are ultimately decided by what happens on the ground. And on the ground along the LAC, India has positioned a weapon so powerful that it can reshape the terrain itself. The K-9 Vajra self-propelled howitzer. Originally a South Korean design, India has not merely imported this weapon. It has adapted it, modified it, and made it its own through a production partnership that has resulted in over 100 units being manufactured on Indian soil. The K-9 Vajra fires 155mm shells at a rate that would make most artillery crews envious. It can unleash its first round within 60 seconds of receiving a fire order, and it can sustain a rate of fire that blankets an area the size of several football fields with high explosive destruction in under a minute. Then it moves. Before the enemy can calculate where the shots came from, the K-9 9 Vajra has already relocated to a new firing position, ready to do it all over again. Now imagine you are a Chinese soldier stationed at a forward position near the LAC. The terrain around you is mountainous, barren, and unforgiving. You have been told that your position is well fortified, that the bunkers you occupy can withstand most conventional fire. Then the first shell lands. The ground shakes so violently that you're thrown off your feet. Before you can process what is happening, a second shell lands, then a third, then a fourth. The explosions come so fast that they blend into a single, continuous roar that drowns out every thought in your head except one. You need to get out, but there is nowhere to go. The shells are falling in a pattern designed to cut off every escape route, every trench, every path that might lead you away from the kill zone. This is what the K-9 Vajra does. It does not just attack a position. It erases it. India has deployed these howitzers in the mountains along the LAC, where their mobility and rapid-fire capability give Indian forces an overwhelming advantage in the kind of high-altitude artillery duels that any conflict with China would inevitably produce. But the K-9 Vajra is not the last surprise that India has placed at China's doorstep. There's a fifth weapon, and it may be the most strategically significant of them all. Not because it is the most powerful, not because it is the fastest or the most technologically advanced, but because of what it represents, a capability that changes the very nature of the threat that India poses to China. And it is a weapon that India built entirely on its own. The nearby subsonic cruise missile is India's answer to a question that every military strategist asks. How do you strike deep into enemy territory without risking a pilot's life? Without sending a fighter jet into the teeth of enemy air defenses, and without crossing the nuclear threshold? The nearby answers all three questions simultaneously. With a range exceeding 1,000 kilometers, this terrain-hugging cruise missile can be launched from Indian soil and reach targets deep inside Tibet, including the very air bases and supply depots that China would depend on in any conflict along the LAC. It flies low, so low that most radar systems designed to detect high-altitude threats simply cannot see it until it is far too late. It navigates autonomously using a combination of inertial guidance, GPS, and terrain-matching technology that allows it to weave through valleys and around mountains with a precision that makes interception extraordinarily difficult. But what makes the nearby truly dangerous is not just its range or its stealth. It is the fact that India can produce this missile domestically, in unlimited numbers, without depending on any foreign government for permission, parts, or technology. Every single nearby that rolls off the production line is a reminder to Beijing that India's strike capability is not borrowed. It is built, it is indigenous, and it is growing. China cannot pressure France to stop selling nearby components the way it might lobby against Rafale deals. China cannot threaten sanctions against a third country to slow down nearby production. This missile is entirely India's own, and that makes it perhaps the most strategically unsettling weapon in India's entire border arsenal. Now step back and look at what India has done. Not one weapon, not two, 5 distinct systems, each covering a different domain of warfare, each filling a gap that the others leave open. BrahMos handles the supersonic strike mission, moving so fast that reaction time becomes a fantasy. The S-400 seals the sky, turning India's airspace into a fortress that no Chinese aircraft can penetrate without extraordinary risk. The Rafale dominates the air-to-air and deep strike domains with combat-proven lethality that China's untested fighters cannot match. The K-9 Vajra controls the ground, delivering devastating artillery fire with speed and mobility that make traditional fortifications obsolete. And the nearby reaches deep behind enemy lines, threatening the infrastructure that China would need to sustain any military operation against India. Together, these 5 weapons do not just defend the border. They fundamentally change the calculus of war. Before these deployments, China could look at the LAC and see opportunity. A border where numerical superiority and infrastructure advantages might translate into territorial gains. Now China looks at that same border and sees a wall of fire. Every scenario that Chinese generals might wargame, whether an air assault, an artillery bombardment, or a ground incursion, runs into at least one of these systems. Most scenarios run into all 5 simultaneously. This is why Xi Jinping has gone quiet. Not because China lacks ambition. Not because Beijing has suddenly decided to respect India's sovereignty. She is quiet because for the first time in the standoff, China does not have a credible military answer for what India has put in place. The silence from Beijing is not peace. It is calculation. It is a dictator staring at a chessboard and realizing that every move he considers leads to catastrophe. And India is not finished. New deployments, new systems, and new indigenous weapons are being developed and tested as you watch this video. The balance of power along the LAC is shifting, and it is shifting fast. We will be covering every development as it happens. So make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss what comes next. Because what India is building on its borders is not just a defense. It is a warning. An entire world is watching very closely.